Thursday, October 13, 2022, now that I have my microphone turned on. The first item on the agenda is the posting of the agenda. Has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
And I want to point out, in case there's anyone here who is concerned with item 13, that this item has been continued to November 10, 20, to the November 10, 22 council meeting. That's 21 Loma Linda Avenue, access dwelling unit permit. So that one will be heard in November, just in case if any of you are here for that, don't stay. This brings us to open time for public expression. This is a time when members of the public are invited to address us about items not on the agenda. You will be permitted 3 minutes to speak. There are some lights down here that tell you when it's green or yellow and red. When it's yellow, it means you have 30 seconds left. Wind it up, because you're supposed to stop talking when it turns red, and I don't want to have to stop you after we reach that point. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council at this time?
Minutes that's allowed?
No, you get 3 minutes.
Come on. Rats. Okay, Barbara Call, 8 Redwood Drive, and I'm here to talk about the housing element. You know, in the years I've lived here, close to 23, there's been 4 town managers and 4 planners, and never has this housing element been such a contentious issue. I mean, it's ridiculous. 111 units, unbelievable, and I just don't think that they belong downtown Ross. Downtown Ross, you guys promised that you would protect the small town charm. You promised you would protect the historic nature. Putting low income, very low income units in downtown Ross would destroy downtown Ross. It is just unacceptable, and I don't know what very low income means, actually. I mean, does it mean they don't have jobs? They don't have an income, they're living off the government? Are we introducing an unsavory element into downtown? I don't know. I mean, you're dealing with the residents, you're dealing with their friends, you're dealing with their relatives, and perhaps their drug dealers. And don't think I'm being facetious here. There are problems in towns, mostly downtown, with drugs, and there's a lot of fentanyl out there. I don't think that people who have school children at the Ross School are going to want to think that there are going to be possibilities these children would be introduced to fentanyl. So in addition to extra crime and perhaps unsavory elements, there's also something called the environmental constraints. Even this RHNA that I have says that the town is required to consider environmental constraints. So if you put units downtown, you've got trees that would have to be cut down, you've got parking that would disappear. I mean, with 13 units, you could have 26 cars plus guests or whatever, and there's no space for that downtown. There's like 9 spaces in front of the post office itself. So you're going to be building a parking garage? I don't know. You've got noise, you've got more traffic, and it's a flood zone. Why would you consider having downtown low-income housing in a flood zone? It should not be on the map. That's what I would like to see you remove this from the agenda. Do it now. I know that Winship Park had something on their agenda and they had it taken off. Somehow their site was removed. So here are some sites where you could put it. You've got 87,000 square feet over at 837 Sir Francis Drake. You've got 26,000 square feet over at Marin Art and Garden Center. You've got 1,742,000 square feet on Bingo. You can't tell me there's no space for 13 units around town rather than downtown. So I would really like to see you remove the downtown sites from the possible housing development sites. You can say, oh, am I done? You can say you won't ever build there, but if you're not going to build there, put them at this $1,742,000.
I'm sorry to point out, Ms. Call, that your 3 minutes have run somewhat over, so I have to cut you off. Thanks
you.
very much for your thoughts. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to address us at this time on an issue not on the agenda? Linda, is there anybody on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay. We will move then next to the mayor's report, which is as follows. Here's a layperson's quick look at the status of what is of interest to us in Ross regarding flood control. There are 3 separate projects which could affect Ross residents. The first is the San Anselmo Flood Risk Reduction Project. Study has shown that what San Anselmo is planning to do will increase flood risk during a 100-year storm to about 8 properties, Ross properties, and 12 San Anselmo properties, but will decrease flood risk to about 480 properties in the Ross Valley, including about 70 in Ross. Federal Emergency Management Agency regulations require that such projects provide mitigation from such effects, sometimes by providing funding to raise residents' homes above increased flood levels. This is a very expensive process, and no such funds are currently available. The second program of interest is Ross's own Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project. This program was being developed by the Marin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District and the Army Corps of Engineers, but ultimately the Corps of Engineers withdrew from either participation in planning or construction of the project, thereby eliminating previously proposed flood diversion tunnels to provide 100 years protection in the creek area alongside Sylvan Lane while carrying floodwater around that area. This leaves Ross basically with plans to remove the fish ladder and rework the creek bed as necessitated by the removal. As planning moves along, the county will be coming to the town for permits for the portions of the construction which will occur on property owned by the town. The third project affecting us is one that Ross alone is doing, the replacement of the Winship Avenue Bridge. That structure has reached the end of its useful life, and the opening under it does not allow a sufficient flow of water to pass under it, causing backups when there is substantial water flow in heavy rain. Right now, full flooding is only available for the fish ladder project. The state is expected to come up with funds for the San Anselmo Flood Risk Reduction Project. The Winship Avenue Bridge project is expected to be funded from federal grants administered through Caltrans. It is likely to be at least several years before construction begins, but we will continue to seek means to speed up that process. As long as weather permits, I'll continue to be available for questions and comment on the steps of the post office from about 10:30 to 12:30 on the day of council meetings, as I did today. And I got a chance to talk to a number of people today. Please stop by and say hello. That brings us to council committee and liaison reports. As any member of the council have wished to make any sort of a report? Julie?
Thank you. Staff and I attended a Safe Routes to School Task Force meeting. It was the kickoff meeting on October 3rd. It seems like the lion's share of the work is going to be done by the Marin Transit Authority and Ross School, at least for right now. I also attended a field trip at the base of Upper Toyon on the San Rafael side to look at a shaded fuel break that has been created with funds from the San Rafael Fire Department and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. They've done an amazing job removing tons of broom and bay, limbing up trees and making that area much safer. And it goes all the way to Upper Toyon, which is in Ross. So it was very good to see a good use of money and good clearing. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a report? Elizabeth?
This isn't a council committee, but it's a committee with a council member. There's a small group of us have been working for the past 2.5 years to buy Bald Hill, which went on the market a little bit ago. And I'm pleased to announce that virtually all of the agreements are in place, signed, and the county has agreed to accept Bald Hill through Marin Open Space Trust. It'll become part of the Marin County Open Space District. It's the 60 acres that is in Ross, the facade that we see, plus the entire summit. And this makes it open space in perpetuity, whereas it could have been bought by, say, a single individual, 1 or 2 estate homes, and they could have owned the entire mountain and blocked off access to the top. So the committee is delighted with the outcome.
And so are the rest of us delighted to hear of the outcome. Anyone else have any reports? Okay, then we'll move on to staff and community reports, starting with the town manager's report. Krista?
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and congratulations to Councilmember Robbins and your committee. It's really just absolutely remarkable achievement, and so excited. Okay, so I have just a few updates for the council this evening. First, if you recall, and it's been the policy of the Public Works Department to close the Ross Common, the playing field, for about 3 months, beginning in around the 20th of December, lasting through mid-March before baseball season begins. That's been the practice for quite a few years. And the reason is to allow the field to rejuvenate during the wet season so that it's really strong for the summer months. And last year we, at the request of members of the community and council members, our Public Works Department did open it a little bit earlier than it used to, and that was well received by the community. And so far, I'm happy to report that this year the field has responded really well over the summer, thanks to the rehabilitation of the irrigation wells last April by our Public Works Department and continuous turf management best practices. So because of this, and then of course, depending on the amount of rain we receive in this fall, these fall months, Public Works Department staff is considering leaving a portion of the playing field open this winter, similar to what we did last year. Staff will be able to make their final decision in December, but I know this is of interest to the council, and I think it's would be great if we can go ahead and keep as much of it open as possible and still let the field heal for the coming summer. A status on our important housing element update project. So the draft housing element will be published to the public on October 18th for a required 30-day review opportunity by the public. Our staff is working with our housing consultant, and they're going to have a community meeting, the second community meeting, to gather comments on this draft housing element update document. That is scheduled for November 7th at 5 p.m. in Ross School, which is where the previous community meeting was held. Prior to that community meeting, a town-wide mailer will be sent out on October 24th to the community. And we will also publish it in the other ways we have via an email blast, etc. And then this draft housing element update document will be reviewed at the town council's December 8th council meeting, with the goal of sending the document to the state HCD department, Housing and Community Development Department of the state of California, on December 16th. HCD, the state, has 90 days to review the town's draft housing element update. So we figure that will be between December 16th, and if they need the whole 90 days, that would be to March 16th. But while HCD is reviewing it, don't worry, there will still be lots of work to be done here in Ross. Our consultant with Diet and Batia will be working on putting together a focused environmental impact report, and also an update to the town's safety element, which is required as part of this housing element process. So then we anticipate that the council will consider final adoption of the housing element, that focused EIR document, and the safety element at your May 2023 meeting. So that's just an update of the timeline. On to good news. So I really enjoyed my first town dinner event that was held on September 30th. I think it was super special and lovely. 350 people registered for the event, and we received lots of positive feedback from the attendees. It was so great to spend time with staff and council members and members of the community. I want to give a big thanks to our staff team who put in many hours to create this memorable event. That's Gretchen Kastitz and Janine Wagner in our Ross Recreation Department, and then Anthony Alcozer in our Public Works Department. So I hope that the council enjoyed it as much as I did. I really think it was special and unique. So thank you. Another Live on the Common event is scheduled for this coming Friday evening on the Common. The event is planned by the Ross Property Owners Association and the Ross Auxiliary with assistance from the town of Ross as a co-sponsor. So that's this coming Friday. And then lastly, I understand that Halloween is a big deal in Ross, and I'm looking forward to experiencing it myself, although sad for me, my kids are too old, so we won't be trick-or-treating, but I would like to experience it. Ross police officers will start closing Shady Lane at about 5 p.m. and eventually the street will be closed from Lagunitas to Fernhill, which is, I believe, what the community usually expects. So that's all for me. Thank you for the opportunity to report.
Is there anyone from the Ross Property Owners Association to give a report?
Yes, Mayor, it looks like we have someone. Let's see. I'm bringing in Matthew Salter. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hello, Council. Hope all is well with all of you. Our POA has been very busy with the auxiliary, as Krista just mentioned. Tomorrow is Live on the Common, so we hope to see you out there, and we want to thank the town for helping sponsor these events, and echoes Krista's comments about how wonderful it is to get the town together for these types of events, for the town dinner, for Halloween, and for the Live on the Common series. Aside from the Live on the Common event, we've been busy with the enclosures around all of the porta potties around town. We have, we're planning for this large Winterfest activity. The auxiliary is leading that, where we actually have an ice skating rink for town members, and it looks like it'll be a 2-day event. So there'll be more to come on that. And we've also been busy with the age-friendly task force, scheduling 2 breakfasts with the age-friendly group to talk about issues that that community needs support with, and happy to drive that agenda. And then the last one, which we're hoping to partner with the town, is thinking about ways of beautifying Kiddo Park. So there'll be more in the coming months as we work with you to hopefully find a way of making that park more user-friendly and getting more usage out of that real estate. And that's all for me, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Matt. This brings us to our consent agenda. There are did I miss one? Oh, I'm sorry, I did. It's an important one. We're going to have a report from our Yes on Measure C committee.
everyone. Hi, I'm Amy Lewis. I live at 40 Madrona Avenue. I'm here with my campaign co-chair, Kelly Dwinells, who lives at 98 Laurel Grove. And we're co-chairing the campaign to support Measure C to renew the Ross School funding. We both have kids at Ross School. We're active in the PTO and the Ross School Foundation. And many of you remember I was here last month to give the preview. We just wanted to give you a little bit more information. Before we go into the details of the measure, I want to just read into the record the names of our committee members. We are very fortunate to have a wonderful coalition on our committee: Julie McMillan, Elizabeth Robbins, Beth Sutro, Colin Shuey, Stephanie Lamar, Leslie Reedy, Stephanie Robinson, Chris Erickson, Nikki Webster, Darius Mazafarian, and Adrian Liggett make up our wonderful, hardworking team. Hopefully you have seen a lot of Yes on Measure C signs around town and have been receiving our mailers in your mailboxes, which Kelly will talk about in a moment. Just as a reminder, this is a long-standing tax. It's been in place for 30 years. It provides over $1 million in critical funding. That actually represents about 10% of the school's operating budget. So the way Measure C is written, it proposes $1,550 per parcel with a 3% increase over 10 years. So this is going to help us ensure strong academic programming, the special programs like Spanish, art, music, and technology. It'll help us maintain our low student-to-teacher ratios, hold on to our high-quality teachers, and then ensure, of course, that we have safe and well-maintained buildings. That $375 increase from our current parcel tax, which is $11.75, will help us address unprecedented increases in operating costs that the school has been facing over the last 8 years. Go to the next slide there. I guess let me just point out, if you can see our on the pie chart there, the property taxes make up a big chunk of our school's annual revenue. The parcel tax is the orange piece that's set out. And you can see also the foundation donations and the PTO and endowment in the blue colors there. Our school is definitely locally funded, so our community is critical to supporting our school and making it the outstanding school that it is, which I will, good transition to the next slide. Our school received the National Blue Ribbon Award from the Department of Education in 2021. This is an award that we have in perpetuity, actually. We will always be noted as a Blue Ribbon award-winning school. And as you all know, a strong school district enhances current and future property taxes, values, and taxes, I guess, in the end. So since the last parcel tax renewal in 2014, we worked with Stephanie Lamar, who's a local realtor, and she found data for us that shows that the average Ross home price has increased 2 times that of neighboring towns such as Kentfield and Larkspur. This is since the last time that the tax was renewed. You all know, as we talk about it all the time, our school offers a community gathering place. We have the new playgrounds for people to enjoy. And for those of you who have found your ballot in your mailboxes, hopefully today or tomorrow when you go, it's really important that you vote. It requires 2/3 vote from voters across the parcels here in Ross. It includes 267 parcels outside the town of Ross as well. As has always been the case, there's an exemption available for voters 65 and older. And we did just have a mailer go out today that has the names of all of our wonderful supporters. We're supported by many community members, including local leaders. As you look around the table, you may recognize your names. Also wanted to just mention that those who endorsed this measure at the very beginning were Chris Erickson, the president of our school board of trustees, Leslie Holmes Reedy, who was a parcel tax campaign chair in 2014, Julie McMillan, a former mayor, town of Ross, and Ross Town Council member, David Peterson, former member of the Ross School Financial Advisory Committee, former chair of the Ross School Endowment, and Garrett Scales, who's also a former mayor. So we have a lot of wonderful community support, which I think leads into the next piece.
And I think to that note, really the biggest hurdle that we face as a community and as a campaign is less about garnering support. It's really about ensuring voter turnout. And in a non-presidential year, that will be our biggest hurdle to ensure that we get that 2/3 affirmative vote. So the ways that we're attempting to do that are laid out here, and hopefully you've seen them, as Amy mentioned, in your mailbox and around town. Our postcard mailings really seek to do a couple of things. One is to just create awareness of the measure and why it's so important to Ross School, and really highlight to people that don't understand. I think there may be a common perception that the school doesn't need the money, or why do you need more than the government is allocating to you? And myself included, didn't understand until joining the campaign, kind of the inverse relationship between property taxes and state and federal funding. And as Amy then noted, it's really we're very heavily reliant on the community to continue to support Ross School. And so anything that we can do to create the awareness, the education, and ensure that voter turnout is what our objective is. So our first mailer was about awareness. Our second mailer is really about showing the support that the community has for the school and for the campaign. We do have a series of information sessions for anybody that wants more information that are intended by not just campaign members, but our interim superintendent, board members, committee members. And our first was just last week, I believe, which was well attended at Wally and Rosanna Lordeau's home on Shady Lane. We have 2 more coming up, and encourage anyone that would like to attend to do so on October 18th and on November 2nd. We will be at the post office. We had to vie for space with the mayor today. I think we got his sunny spot, so next time we'll know better. We have been very willing to kind of share information with local publications. The Marin Independent Journal reached out for information, which we readily provided. For anyone that saw it, the headline was a little unfortunate about a 30% increase in the tax. But if you read the balance of the article, it's actually very positive and supportive. So for anyone that had pause at that, we felt good that the coverage was actually supportive. And on that same note, really being able to continue to inform people at our events. So someone mentioned the Live on the Common. We will be there. We are attending the upcoming breakfast for Age Friendly Ross, and really want to highlight to people that every vote counts. There's always more information available on our website. 2 of those wonderful children are my own, so the artwork hopefully resonates. And really the list of upcoming events. So between the post office, Live on the Common, our information sessions, and then really highlighting to people the key dates. So knowing that the majority of people will be voting by mail. There is not a voting center here in Ross as there has been in the past. And so we want to make sure that we are directing people as needed to either St. Sebastian's in Kentfield or the American Legion Hall in San Anselmo for those that would like to vote in person. And just, as active citizens yourselves in the community, just encouraging you to cast your own vote, encourages others to cast their vote by November 8th. So thank you for listening. Yes, please, any questions?
Thank you. Julie?
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
So my comment is you all, both of you are doing a tremendous job running this campaign. And after Elizabeth and I ran our own campaign in June, and I think we wished that you would have been around to help us because you're a well-oiled machine. And my question is, I haven't heard of any opposition for Measure C, and I'm just wondering if you have heard of any opposition.
No, thankfully, no. I think it's always something that you don't know kind of what's going to come, and really young, old, all backgrounds have really been supportive of the measure from a more, what would you call it, organizational standpoint. The one that we had our eye out on was COST. I always
Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers.
Thank you. Who did not take a position. There was no rebuttal argument in any of the materials, and we've actually not even received a single negative question or complaint during the course of the campaign. So we're optimistic that it'll remain that way.
Can I ask a question, Beach?
Sure.
You know, it's such a shame that we don't have a voting site in Ross, because I do think that that makes it really easy for people to vote and reminds them, some people who kind of forget that there's voting. And I didn't really get the memo remember I was texting you two, being like, where do I vote? I wonder if there's something we can even do about that to get back our voting site. Linda, you?
Yeah, there isn't. The Elections Department decides that. And it's based on population. Ross is just too small. And so now that the Voters' Choice Act is in place, it's going to be vote centers going forward. And they're not scheduling any for Ross.
Could we put something in the morning after about the voting
Yes,
centers in?
it's all in there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this actually brings us to the consent agenda. There are 4 items on the agenda. Does any member of the council wish to pull any of the items for separate discussion? Seeing none, does any member of the public wish to pull any of the 4 items for separate discussion?
No.
Okay, we'll move on to,
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
okay, we have a second? Will you call the mayor, the roll, Linda?
Yes. How do you vote? Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Mayor Cole?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, that we now come to the administrative agenda. The first item is Town Council consideration or direction of a Recreation Department after-school extended childcare program and budget adjustment. Gretchen, you have a report for us?
I do. Thank you guys so much for having me here tonight. It's always great to see all of you. Okay, so I just have a short little PowerPoint presentation to go over what we had discussed last time, and we can then have, or you guys can have a discussion after that. So to begin, the recommendation that the staff is providing is that the town council review the information on the costs and logistics of resuming Kids Club, which is the extended care program, provide direction to the town manager on how to proceed, including the additional appropriation of funds if necessary. We will be discussing a pilot program, and this will run from January 2023 to June 2023. And that will be 20 academic weeks. If the town council directs the establishment of the pilot program, then it is recommended that the town council amend the current fiscal year budget, account number 6192-95, which is for recreation leaders and instructors, from $120,000 to $153,000 to pay for the increased cost associated with running this pilot program. So brief background is the Kids Club was introduced in 2013. Prior to that, Ross Recreation ran specialized enrichment programs and youth sports. Kids Club, so prior to COVID, there were approximately 20 to 30 students enrolled each day of the week. There were 2 part-time employees that ran that program, along with office staff, which coordinated registration, invoicing, and marketing. When students returned to in-person learning, the Kids Club enrollment dropped to an average of 4 students per day, even with continued outreach from both the recreation department and the superintendent's office. And I would like to make a quick note that the same staff was there prior to COVID as after COVID. So, and we did not offer it at the beginning of this academic year, this fall. So that would be the 22-23 academic school year. Last meeting on September 8th at the town council, the council asked for staff to provide more information on the costs and logistics to restarting this program. From the analysis that I did, it would be approximately $2,500 per week to run Kids Club. You can see here, I know this is probably a lot to look at, but it was in the staff report. It's a breakdown of those expenses It's not an exact number or science because, there's, varying factors that can come up, but this was the number that seemed most realistic. So that's looking at the two part-time instructors and then the office staff time that would be needed, the rent, supplies, custodial and training background, and other miscellaneous expenses that might come up. So based on the weekly amount of $2,500 to run the program, we would have the cost of the program be $12 an hour, which is similar to what is charged in neighboring towns at places like the YMCA and Marin Enrichment and similar programs. So in order to cover that cost, there needs to be an equivalent of 13 kindergartners each weekday or 15 first to fifth graders. And just to explain that, the kindergartners get out an hour earlier, so they would be there for 3 hours versus the older kids who would be there for 2 hours. And as I said, the costs are similar to the neighboring towns, and just a note that the Ross School staff does get the 20% discount. So any of their children or that would attend would have that 20% discount that we would honor, which would lower the revenue brought in. But I do think it's very important to honor the relationship that we have with them, and that's been a long-standing thing. So the fiscal impacts, like we said, the pilot program would be from January to June this coming year, and the estimated maximum cost is $33,000. And to explain where we got that number, so this is looking at if there was an assumption of 4 children registered per day. This is kind of looking at a worst case scenario. We of course hope that we get more than that, but there's no way to guarantee that. That was the number of responses that we did get from the superintendent's email that went out at the beginning of the school year. So it may have changed since then, and I'll discuss a little bit further how we're going to know if it's changed. Of course, if there's more than 4 children with each child that's registered, the amount that would need to be subsidized would decrease with each child that was additionally registered in addition to the 4. One note is that this would eliminate the Ross Recreation Classroom for our use for specialized enrichment programs. Right now, we have about 54 students that are registered in the programs that we have in the fall classes there. We bring in about 20,000, this is just looking at fall 2022. We have about 20,000 revenue that we're bringing in from those classes that are utilizing that space, and about $6,000 net. And that $6,000 goes to helping to pay for office staff salaries, rent, that type of thing. And many of those classes, or I think all, are run by independent contractors, so they cover their own insurance, supplies, so that expense is all on them. Let's see. I have begun the discussion with the superintendent to explore the ability to utilize other classrooms within the school. It's unsure whether we'd be able to use the classrooms at the time of dismissal, which is what's been so great about the Kids Club or Ross Recreation Classroom. But in our MOU, we do have access to 4 additional classrooms in addition to the Ross Rec Room, but that could potentially be not until after 3:30 p.m. So that's something that we're exploring with the superintendent's office right now. So as we go through this, the first option that you guys can explore is keeping things status quo, how we're doing them now, which would be having classes offered at the time of dismissal, specialized enrichment programs, and cover to the best of our ability the same time frame. And also having Ross Recreation staff assist the children from the classroom to their program, so the parents don't have to come down to the school to do that. So we've been doing that this fall, and it's been working fine as far as getting the kids to their programs. The second option is going to be to have the council direct staff to reestablish the Kids Club pilot program. And as I said, it'll be 20 academic weeks. We're going to be obtaining pledges from the K through 5th families starting hopefully tomorrow or Monday, if you choose to do this. And we're going to have a $100 non-refundable deposit to hopefully have people not just email us to try to increase numbers, but have a realistic number of what it's going to look like that have students in the room. So we're going to start that. We would also start the hiring process immediately, because I think we spoke last time about how that could be one of our biggest hurdles, is finding these people that are able to do a part-time position that's, you know, just these 3 hours in the afternoon. It's a bit of an odd work schedule, but it could potentially, you know, work for some. And then, of course, staff would report back to you, you know, as the program goes on, about how it's going, what enrollment is looking like, and all of that, so that you guys would have a good deal of knowledge about whether this was something that you wanted to continue or not. I already kind of went through this, but quickly, the timeline is that we would start to gather these pledges as soon as possible, get those job listing out there. We would have a deadline to receive those pledges by October 28th. And then once we receive those pledges, we would open our registration October 31st, or maybe November 1st. I was realizing that was Halloween. And then put all of our marketing efforts into action. And the superintendent's office has been more than willing to collaborate with us on that and help us spread the word, because they're the ones that have the full email list of the school. And then on January 4th, that's the first day back from winter break. That would be the first day of Kids Club. And this start date is contingent on the successful hiring of 2 part-time employees. So that's an important note there. And thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Does anyone on the council have any questions for Gretchen?
You know, I was involved in 2013 when we got that program off and running, and I'm just curious, we don't really consider the rent cost or the custodial. I mean, it's our building, our space, but I get why you're trying to monetize the whole program, so that seems appropriate. But like, for example, custodial, you would add custodial services that you don't currently, Ross Rec currently doesn't incur?
Right, so actually right now we are doing our custodial ourselves. The Ross Rec office staff is doing it because of the limited number of enrichment programs that we have. We've been able to do that. If we were to have a 5-day program in there, we don't have the bandwidth in the office to continue doing that, so we would have to outsource the custodial. So that's where that number is coming from.
And that's what we did before.
We actually had a custodian that worked at the school that was an independent contractor that did that back when Kids Club was happening, and he is no longer interested in doing that, unfortunately, because it was such an easy thing to have him right there on campus. So it's something we're going to have to look into and find someone that can do it that's outsourced.
I had a concern about the, calling it a pilot program, because we did try and hire, I'm trying to remember if it was a planner, an assistant planner for, it was like a year contract. We ended up just having a really hard time finding that position because of the fact that it was very public, that it was a very temporary situation. And so if you call it if you're trying to get someone who needs the work and is going to switch jobs, I mean, are you really going to get good people? I mean, isn't that a concern?
Well, that's a good point. But one thing about that is that this program wouldn't be running in the summer regardless. But these people would be hired as part-time rec instructors. That would be the title. And a lot of times we're able to utilize those people in summer camps for whether it be Sporty Girl Camp, or if they're really into art, we could create an art camp. So there's ways to be flexible with that and find employment for them during the summer that would allow them to work through the summer potentially. And then, and we were always looking for good rec instructors to do all sorts of programs with us. So there's potential that even we wouldn't have to say that, there's a drop dead date of June 2023 for this position, I don't think, especially as a part-time. It's not a full-time position. It's more flexible. So I think we wouldn't have to have it that way, where it's saying that this is only a 6-month position.
And the, you said 3 hours a day. I mean, I'm assuming it goes to 6 o'clock and it doesn't start at 3.
Well,
because we have
so
kindergarten.
that's something we can discuss. Last year, it ran from 2 to 5, and we had very few between 4 and 5 o'clock. We could I don't know if it used to go to 6, but, okay, so that was before my time, but it could be from 2 to 5:30, 2 to 6 potentially. There was such a small demand for that last hour that but maybe it's changed, right? So it's not something to say no to potentially.
And I'm confused because I looked at the rec programs that we're offering now, and you're saying you'll have to find places, but we always had the same similar run of rec programs. So I'm confused as to where those were when we offered the same, what I see as really the same program.
We have more enrichment programs now that aren't, we have a lot of the ones that are the same are the outdoor programs. We have more programs that would be run better indoors right now for this higher number of enrichment programs. We've had access to the green room before on campus and the conference room and things like that. So they've found places for us to do other classes, but the real issue is going to be that dismissal time because teachers are contracted to a certain time, so it's hard for us to get into their classrooms because they're working, they're prepping or whatever, which I completely understand. So that's the conversation that I'm trying to talk with David about. And I know he wants to make it work. He wants us to be able to find a way to do both of these things. It's just a matter of how to do it without disrupting the teachers that are doing their work, which is obviously very important.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember when I was on the Ross Recreation Committee for a long time, we thought the aftercare program really helped our enrichment program because what people would do is drop their kids for an hour and then they'd sign up for, Sandrick's program
Right.
or another program, and they could kind of seamlessly go, whereas once a parent grabs them home.
Right, so maybe if the need to have that dismissal time enrichment program isn't as necessary if the kids club is happening because there's the other option to have something at dismissal time. So, and then potentially if we could take them to another program.
Can you explain that again? I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that if kids club is happening at the time of dismissal,
Right.
it wouldn't potentially be as essential to have our enrichments classes also right at dismissal.
Right.
But there may be some people that don't want to sign up for kids club and would really like their kids to go directly to an enrichment program. So that's something we're going to have to work out.
And we haven't been using these any classrooms.
Well,
we weren't MOU agreement.
We have in the past, but since COVID, during COVID, we weren't allowed to because the process for the janitors every day was so intense with cleaning each classroom so thoroughly that we couldn't, and that was understandable. We did use a conference room last year for our chess class, and that worked. It's a smaller room, but we have in the past used them. We've used them more in the summer also when we have had like our kinder camps and Camp Safari and things like that.
Julie?
Question, Gretchen. So this worst case scenario, the subsidy would be $33,000 for the 20-week period.
Right.
So if we did it for a whole year, and we're assuming worst case scenario, then it would be $66,000.
Well, we would take out summer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what would the fall cost be?
Well, so how many months are in the fall? So August, September, October, November, 5. So it would be less than that, probably in the 20,000, 25.
Okay. And I'm just wondering how much excess revenue does Ross Rec generate that contributes to the town?
So it's interesting. So this last fiscal year, we had, I believe I want to say it was about 150,000 more revenue than expenses. 130? No? I'll let Krista take this.
There was but it's not as simple as saying that we had more revenue and expenses, because it's what costs are being allocated. I believe that, and we haven't done a full, cost recovery analysis of it yet. I would like to do that. I do think that we have better cost recovery here in Ross because we don't have these big facility costs. Most cities spend a lot of money to maintain senior centers and community centers, and aquatics facilities are big. And so when they add in the cost of those facilities, it really brings down their cost recovery. Well, we don't really have that here. Our rent with the school district is modest. And we do pay for, we do pay for a certain amount of, we do pay for our share of utilities and water. And, there's that stuff that we do pay for, but it's very modest compared to other communities. So I think our cost recovery is higher here. We also do not have much in the way of senior programming. So a lot of cities will provide senior programming at lower costs because a lot of seniors could be on fixed incomes, and and they have senior facilities. They have indoor facilities where you can have programming. So if you look on, it's just not as simple as looking at on what's the revenue and what are the expenses. It's not as simple as that. And if the council's interested in looking in that further, we can certainly, start trying to figure that out more in the coming year.
Yeah, just a quick note on that. With recreation, it's something that can change a lot year to year. And so it's hard to say I feel like almost impossible to guarantee that we would have a certain number or a surplus, because a lot of times for recreation, it's either the goal is to either break even, or they're often subsidized. The departments are often subsidized by the town. And that's kind of, this last year, I think, was one of the first years that we've actually had a surplus. And I think part of that is because we had cut back so much on our expenses from COVID. As far as marketing and staff, and we'd gone bare bones type of thing, and now that we are having robust amount of programs now, it may not look like that at the end of this year. It's just nothing I can guarantee.
And thank you. And that's a very good point, Gretchen, because if you recall, the council, because the staffing levels had decreased in the department because of COVID, and the recreation programming level started coming back, but our staff levels were still very low. And so just this past June, the council supported increasing, Gretchen's position was actually 75% time. Now her position is 100% full-time. And then another position was, I believe, 60% or 65% time. That's now 75% time. And we added back another part-time position. So, but I believe that the staffing level is still below what it was pre-COVID. Was that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't have the exact number in my head, but it is
Yeah.
below.
So you'll see that difference between revenue and expenses is going to even out more just in this year alone, because we're adding back the staffing.
I guess I would be interested in receiving more of that information to understand how much of a surplus Ross Rec is generating. Maybe go back before COVID for 3 or 4 years and then make some general projections to determine how much potential surplus there would be going forward. I think that would help with the decision to figure out what is the sweet spot of the number of kids, and what is the sweet spot of how much the town, or really, I would be more comfortable if the funds to subsidize were being generated by Ross Rec instead of the town. And I'm going into this discussion now, and I apologize. It's not a question.
Well, I just want to understand this point. no matter how much we go back and how much we study, it is still going to be difficult to predict, to get solid figures. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Especially in right now because there's so much change happening as we come out of this COVID era. It makes it harder to predict. But yeah, things are different than they were before COVID too. So when you look at those years, it may not be an exact reflection of what's happening currently.
Elizabeth?
I just wanted to make sure I understood this issue of if Kids Club starts right after school and if the school can't give us another classroom. You said at the moment there are about 54 children in enrichment programs who are using the classroom that would be the Kids Club classroom. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And one of the question is, did you ask about using the kindergarten classroom after, because years ago, those rooms, the kindergarten classroom housed a carpentry class, so it wasn't just a nice clean program. They were doing carpentry in the kindergarten classroom all afternoon, all Fridays. So that was a very accessible classroom because they got out early. So what have you looked into that room?
I did approach that with interim superintendent David Rice, asking if those classrooms might be available because the kids get out earlier. His concern was that those teachers are still contracted to a certain time, and that's when they do a lot of their prep work for the next day, and he wasn't so sure that that would be possible. It's not something he'd said a direct no to, but it didn't sound like it was ideal or potentially possible with the contract situations. But I will continue that conversation with him.
Yeah, it just seems like there should be, I mean, Julie and I spent years rebuilding that school and we added a lot of rooms.
Yeah.
Like, the music room. I mean, there have to be rooms that don't have a certificated teacher art room.
The art room, yeah.
There just has to be a room because I don't, if there really are 54 children, I don't see that there's any way you can displace 54 kids in an enrichment program for a kids club. You want to have both.
Right.
There's got to be some way to do both.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else on the council have any further questions at this time? Okay, in that event, we will open it to public expression on this subject. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to discuss this issue?
Good evening. My name is Billy Buck, and I live at 83 Bolinas Avenue. And I have a 5th grader, a 6th grader, and 7th grader at the Ross School. And I just want to offer a perspective. When my kids were little, well, I've always worked, but we also had childcare at home, and I worked from home. And the program was something that my kids still begged to do, and they loved it. And even though they had most days other options, it was something, it was a cool place to get to hang out with your friends, and wasn't arranged play dates where some kids could go, other kids couldn't. It was a community, it was an opportunity for all the kids to just be together and enjoy each other in one big play date. So I wanted to share how important it was to our family, even though I wasn't in the camp of needing it. And I think with the right kind of environment there, and teachers or whoever the providers are, and a real momentum and support from the school, which in talking to David Rice, I know there's enthusiasm for. I think it can be, we can work together, the town, with you, to make it special. No?
Go ahead.
I am wordy. It can be a place where I think builds momentum on its own. And I would also love to see it not just be kindergarten, 1st grade, but somehow incorporate some of the older kids as part of their volunteer hours to work together with the youngins, and somehow loop everybody together. So the momentum of leadership above, et cetera, is brought together, and it's not just provider kids. It's more of a community peach pit expression. I keep saying that from the good old 90210. But it is important. It was important to our family, and I would love to see it go in that direction again. And I'm happy to work with anybody if it's helpful to help make that happen. So that's it. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to address us regarding this item?
Not as tall as she is. Hi, Elena Batalla from 18 Sylvan Lane. And I think I've spoken to all of you about this issue now, but I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I've mentioned in our conversations is this advisory council made of parents who have and can give some guidance or support just from a parent's perspective and people who have a stake in the program. One thing I was mentioning is that everybody who's involved in this decision-making doesn't necessarily have kids or, I mean, has kids maybe, but doesn't send their kids to this program or need the program right now. So there is actually on the Town of Ross website, it says that there is an advisory council. It has the names and phone numbers, but that's not running right now. But that is something that if you needed help with, I'm happy to put together. I know there's parents who are interested in forming that, being part of that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online, anyone else in the audience who wishes to address us on this subject? Is there anyone online, Linda?
Yes, I'm bringing in Adrienne Leggett.
Okay.
Go ahead, Adrienne.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Liggett from 10 Madrona. I just wanted to make the council aware that I think this is a really important issue as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was speaking with David Allen Hughes today at the Ross Preschool. And this is a program that he is willing to take over for us. I think there's a lot of synergies between the preschool teachers getting out at 1 o'clock, and he could come over and help run the program with some of his teachers. And, you know, they do a lot of fun after school programming at that school that they could then bring into the Ross School. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. He's willing to do it. He has a background in running a fabulous preschool in town. He's run summer camp programs. So I would love us to explore all options to help make this available to our kids. And again, to make it a fun place to be, not just aftercare, but a place that kids want to be at of all ages. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, is there anyone else online?
There's no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Elizabeth?
Well, I think you all know how supportive I am of this program and how important I think it is as a community in terms of, you know, supporting families and supporting working families and providing this kind of a space. And I think what people have said, which is if their kids didn't need it, it was just wildly popular for the time frame. And I think it was probably lucrative, you know, back then. And so it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be very, I'm concerned about calling it a pilot program. There's nothing that says that we have to not continue it, but, or discontinue it if we needed to at some point. But I think calling it a pilot program would be a very big concern, because I think you're not going to get quality of people. And, you know, if I had a nanny and that was maybe not as great as the aftercare program, am I going to let him go because Ross is going to maybe for 20 weeks, you know, try something? I mean, I think it's a problem all the way around. I also think I'm a little concerned about saying to people, you need to put $100 down for a program we haven't staffed, and we're saying is, I mean, I just don't feel like that's fair to the consumer at Ross Rec, and it's not anything we've ever done, and I just think that I don't think it's a good idea. You know, I think we've heard from a lot of people that this program was great, and I think we should have the faith that it will be great again. And if we do have to, make it great by bumping up the pay or making the hours something that work with some other enrichment program, maybe we can try that. And to the point about whether or not we should have an advisory committee, I just want to say, I was on the advisory committee, completely agreed that it should be disbanded when we disbanded it because we didn't have anything to do. It was like no longer really, it was, do we want the red pencils or blue pencils? And so it made a lot of sense, but I've always had that concern that, Ross Rec needs to hear from the parents. And I totally get the process that Ross Rec went through in deciding to eliminate this position. It makes sense. There was reach out, it was, but I also think if you had had an advisory committee, there probably would have been you would have heard from the community at that juncture rather than after the decision was made. And so, I don't know if the Ross Rec committee really needs to be fully rebanded. I mean, maybe we could consider doing something and having it 4 times a year just to give parent feedback on programming. Or maybe it meets more often to try and help or weigh in or be involved in the aftercare program. So it's truly the program people want to see. But I think that we shouldn't be so hesitant about this program. It was a great program. And there's no reason that we should expect that chess is going to all of a sudden bombshell next year, just like we shouldn't expect that this program isn't going to come back. So we should rerun this program, and it's always appropriate to look at whether programs are lucrative or not, but I don't think we should put this on such a tight leash.
Elizabeth?
I think this all started because only 4 families wanted to be in Kids Club this fall. And, I think we all value that we have a lovely K-8 school in the community and it's small. And then I think we all value the idea of aftercare. And those 2 things don't always match up because with a small number of children, we didn't have enough children to run the program this fall. I think Ross Rec did a great job trying to run programs that could fill in so that, yes, you had to go from program to program, but there were programs throughout the afternoon to make up the gap that was left by not having Kids Club. I think that if there was an interest in Kids Club, and I think it needs to be more than 4, because I don't think that the whole community should be subsidizing aftercare for 4 families, but if there's an interest in Kids Club, I think by all means we should start it again. And I like Gretchen's suggestion, and it was part of the staff report, that emails be sent out to ask for pledges for the starting in January. I believe it was the superintendent's recommendation to have the non-refundable $100 deposit. I do think if we don't run the program, that deposit has to be refundable, obviously. But if we need to have a sense of a commitment, I think, unless we're willing to backfill it no matter what. And I don't know that the town should backfill it no matter what. So I don't think the town should say we're willing to spend $33,000 or basically $50,000 a year for a few families. But I think if we got, at least for this the rest of this year, if we got, half of this, at least enough to only backfill half of that, 15,000, 18,000 or something, I think that's reasonable for the beginning. I don't mind calling it a pilot program. I mean, it's a pilot program whether or not we call it a pilot program. If there's not much interest, if it goes well, it's obviously going to keep going. If it doesn't go well and we only have 4 students, it's probably not going to keep going. Or at least it would come back to the council to ask, do we want to, backfill $33,000 or $50,000 a year? But I think I liked the suggestion that maybe some of the preschool teachers could be our teachers. I mean, that would be amazing because they have, a part-time job already. It certainly will be a challenge to find people. I'm not that worried about the summer because, as you said, it's not a year-round job anyway, so that it's, whether you call it a pilot or not, this isn't a year-round 40-hour-a-week job. It's a part-time job, and it's during the school year. And actually, this is a pretty good opportunity for someone who wants a part-time job because, as you pointed out, Gretchen, there are excellent summer opportunities so that there could be continued employment. So, I mean, it could be a win-win for everybody. So I guess my thinking is if there's an interest, and I would be fine with like half of the number of kids for the spring and for the winter and spring, half of what it takes to pay itself off, then I think absolutely we should go ahead and do it.
Julie?
I think we need more information. I don't think we want to discontinue all the enrichment kids for 4 or 6 or even 10 kids club kids. That doesn't make economic sense or fairness sense. So I think we need, why don't you let me finish and then, yeah. So I think we need to get more definitive answers from Superintendent Rice about alternative space and make sure that that's actually available. I also would feel more comfortable going forward with the pledge process, and I am comfortable with that, especially since he is the one who suggested it. I would also like more information about the surplus revenue that Ross Rec generates pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID. I know it's projections. I know it's, touchy-feely projections. But, if Ross Rec is generating $50,000 or $100,000, we should know that, and that would help us with our decision. If the town is subsidizing Ross Rec as it currently stands now or in the next few years, that would also influence our decision. I'm not sure about the advisory board. I think that really depends on whether or not, Gretchen, you feel like you need additional feedback. I think you all do a lot of surveys after classes are completed to get feedback from parents. But that's more of a decision I would feel more comfortable with for the Ross Rec staff to make rather than the council to make. Yeah, so I think that's my main issue. We need more information. We need more information on the space. We need more information on how many people are going to sign up potentially, and we need more information about what our finances are.
One other comment?
Yes.
I just have one other comment. I mean, I do agree about the after-school enrichment, that I don't want to see those programs changed out for Kids Club. I'd like to see them both. And then this, I don't know if parents can make this happen, but, one of the problems for working parents is, well, for 100 years, Ross School had classes 5 days a week, and about 10 years ago, Ross School decided to have classes 4.5 days a week. And I think if there was an end to early release, that would help a lot of parents' childcare issues, because at least it would be consistent every single day. So that would be one other avenue to work on, not through the town, but through the school.
Bill?
I think this is something that's worth doing and continuing depending on what the results are. But I also hope that in the process of doing this, we can get to a better understanding of why people choose the Kids Club or don't choose it. It appears from the staff report that we had attendance of some 30 children a couple of years ago before COVID, then 20 one year, 20 the next year, then COVID, then 4. And I know we talked about this last time, why that happened. Was it COVID or whatever? But we still don't have, I think, a clear idea of how, that dramatic drop, 16 fewer children. And we don't really know whether that was just an anomaly or there's some trend, or there were more kids interested in enrichment, or parents and kids interested in enrichment as opposed to simply the Kids Club. So whatever we do, I hope we can get a better idea of trends and whether there's some long-term trend or whether this was just an anomaly, so that maybe we will go back to 20. I know, though, that you do need to hire people and you need to get going on this. So while I agree with Councilmember McMillan that it would be nice to have more information, I am concerned that if we don't move ahead with this, we may not be able to offer this beginning in January. And so I think I would be willing to take that risk that we do have to subsidize this to some considerable extent, just to be able to move ahead with it and get it back in place in January.
I'm in favor of this program, but I have some conditions, I guess, that go to my favoring it, which is I really think we ought to set a minimum number of kids that parents are willing to put down $100 and say, I want my kid in for the spring. I wish we had more information, but I agree with Bill that I think we need to make a decision pretty quickly in order to get the program together to start in January. How we satisfy me, well, I would support if someone made a motion that we needed some minimum number of signups. I would support doing the program right now. I don't think that at this time we ought to create an advisory board. I think we ought to, you can call it what you want, but it is a tryout to see if it'll work. And there's no point in going through the exercise of creating an advisory board to supervise something that may last only 5 or 6 months. So I guess that's where I am. I support it with some limits and with some doubts also, because we don't really know apparently how much Ross Rec generates in excess of its costs. And I'd like to have that information generated in the meantime so that we know it as we consider making this a permanent program if I won't call it pilot, if the temporary program is approved. Julie, go ahead.
I was thinking in my head to myself before this meeting, what would be the number that would be kind of viable? And if we set 10 as the number, what would be the amount that the town or Ross Rec would be subsidizing? Do we have that figure?
I don't have the exact number, but if it was 13, I was going to do this. I was going to do this calculation and I didn't do it. I can definitely get you that number after the fact, but it would be, I'm trying to think, if it's 25, if you guys want to discuss something else, I can do a quick calculation on
Then
my
I'll
phone.
add,
Sure, go ahead.
so
Elizabeth will help you stall.
besides a number, I would also propose that we have a condition that an extra room be available so that we're not automatically eliminating the end-of-school enrichment programs that have 54 kids enrolled right now.
My thought on that is, I can't believe if we say we're going to start a program that the superintendent can't find rooms for us.
But if it's not part of the arrangement, I mean, then we lose out, we don't have a room. I mean, I think the school wants this to happen. I think they can find a room, but I think we should say that we need a minimum number and we need an extra room. And there will be a room.
I just want to add, though, I was on the rec committee for like 10 years. I actually looked every single time we put the schedule out. There is no difference in this schedule. We would have, Magic would have a cooking class. There would be something over at, different places. We have the same schedule. So I don't know where those enrichment programs were before, but they should be able to look back and say where the location was and do them. There's no difference. The chess, you know, the different programs that we have are the same programs that we had. So I'm
I
just
think
saying.
it's just that first hour where Kids Club would be in the Ross Rec classroom. And right now, there's an enrichment program every single day in the Ross Rec classroom right after school. So that's what's kind of getting kicked out. That's where we need the extra classroom, is for one program every Monday through Friday, so that Kids Club can go to the Ross Rec classroom.
I'm just saying, like, we had shop outside, we had chess offered in various locations. I think Ross Rec can do it because I know it has. And when I looked at the schedule I think it was the last agenda item, I looked at it and I was just kind of floored at how similar it was to all those different years. But I just want to point out, I don't know about you, but have you ever really made a childcare decision without knowing who the person is going to be? And what are we asking these people to do? I mean, if we say put down $100, but you're really on the hook to use it for a semester, or you're on the hook for the $100 and you got to try it and use up your $100. I mean, I think it may not be unreasonable to say, put $100 and try it. I think it's a little unreasonable to say you're now committed for, 20 weeks and you don't even know if the teacher is going to be someone your kid is going to have no interest in being with or not. That's just not how people make childcare decisions, sight unseen.
But I didn't think it was, the hope is that a pledge and $100 means a real commitment, but if you don't show up, you're only out the $100. You're not, so it's just an effort to have, a true sense or a reasonable sense of who's interested. It's not a fortune.
So you use $100, you pay for a week and you pay for whatever that is and your $100 goes to that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it'd be like a
Yeah,
credit.
it could
on
be a
the-
credit.
Credit
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see, because it shouldn't be like an enrollment fee. It would, I could see it as a credit. It's just
I just
trying to
think
get
we
a,
should be really clear because I don't want them to say you have to commit for a whole semester. That's just not very
Right.
realistic.
In
I
fact, a
don't
credit
think you
makes,
could enforce that anyway.
and a credit
right?
makes better sense, because if someone enrolls, the day before school, they don't pay the $100 and, so it has to be a credit that you get back if we don't make the program work.
Could I just say something about the $100 real quick? The idea is that the $100, so if you make the pledge and then you make the decision to register, that $100 would go towards your registration. It wouldn't be something separate. So just wanted to clarify that real quick.
Well, and you could say if you drop out, no matter what you do, you don't get the 100 back until the school year ends.
If we were to do the pledges, that's happening in the next 2 weeks, is that right? You'd have that information by,
Yeah,
in
the
2
idea,
weeks.
yeah, the idea was to have the deadline be October 28th. Mhm.
Okay.
So the next couple weeks, yeah.
And then we would decide in November if we go ahead with it. Our meeting is,
Well, the idea is that it's going to be super important for me to start the hiring process. If
so we could set a number now, and then if that's met in 2 weeks, it's a go. Is that right? Without it coming back to the council?
Through the mayor. So in response to Councilmember McMillan's inquiry about 10, we believe it would be 10.
it would be a $14,000 subsidy if there were 10,
So,
right?
yeah, for this non-pilot program. But, so if the council wanted to say to us that, under the recommendation, you could say that you're providing direction on, you're directing the establishment of the pilot program, and you are amending the current fiscal year budget from 120 to 153 to pay for the increased costs, contingent upon the registration, the pledge and deposit of an average of 10 kids per day.
And then I would add, an additional room for that first hour. So could I make that motion?
Well,
I'm
that's just
sorry,
a
wait,
suggestion.
Are we saying that you have, the 20th is what you said? That's 1 week. You have 1 week for
The
10 people?
28th is just to, the 28th,
28th.
October 28th. Yeah, to just to get the superintendent's office to have time to send out the email to the whole K through 5th to let them know that we're going to have something on our website set up where they can go, like as if, saying you click it to do a class, but instead you're paying for the $100 deposit. Of course, if the class wasn't to run, that deposit would be refunded.
All right, I just want to tell you, I'm supporting this. I think it's like really an unusual program in Ross Rec that we've never done. We're going to have people sign up without the teachers hired and within 2-week time frame. And so we either support aftercare, as many people said that we should, or we don't. Some people don't want to put their kids in full time or a day. We have tons of drop-in kids. I'm just saying, there's no reason to expect ballroom dancing is going to be wildly unpopular next year, nor is there any reason to expect that, all of a sudden Sandrick's program isn't, nor is there any reason to expect that this program is going to be wildly unsuccessful unless we hire crummy teachers or we don't have a good program. But I think that there's the will of the staff and the community to do that, and I think we should just let it happen.
We only had 4 people in the fall when the same email went out.
It was COVID. I mean, it was a
Fall?
different time frame. I think people are just getting back to doing things very differently.
I think people have really heard about this and been asking for this to happen. So I feel like if we jump on this and make it happen really fast in the next 2 weeks, I think that's really helpful to people because they'll know, yes, it's going to happen, or no, it's not going to happen. And I think we could probably get 10 kids. I mean, we're hearing from the community that there are more than the 4. We just, we don't know. We haven't seen them yet. Well, why don't I make a motion? We'll see if it passes. So my motion would be that we direct staff to move ahead with an aftercare program, that we ask for pledges and a refundable $100 deposit if the program doesn't happen. And if it happens, then that's part of the, that goes to the payment for the program. And that we will move forward if we have 10 students who are interested, and that Ross School can help find a room so that the current enrichment programs in that hour 1 can continue. That's my
Okay, is there
motion.
a second?
I'll second.
You want to also clarify about a budget amendment for the amount?
Oh, and
As
the
part of the
budget
motion.
amendment. So what, Krista, should the budget amendment be for? If we're doing 10, should it then be for 13? Did you say 13,000? Okay, so then it's,
Good point, thank you. Gretchen, if I could just confer, you said 14,000.
14.
So it would be
Let's just,
to amend the current fiscal year budget from 120,000 to 134,000 to pay for the increased costs associated with running the program.
okay,
And we have a second?
sure.
Okay.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher? Councilmember Breckus?
No.
And Mayor Cole?
Aye.
And the motion passes with 4 in favor and 1 opposed.
And are we going to have this back on our agenda next month so we can find out what happened?
Absolutely, if there are 2 of you would like to bring it back, we absolutely will do that. We'll provide as much information as we're able to collect.
And I would also like to know the overall, revenue.
Yes, yes. Do our very absolute best
Thank you very
to
much.
get all that to you.
Okay. We'll move on to our next item, which is Town Council approval of consultant services agreement for preparation of the Town Master Facilities Plan and authorizing the town manager to execute the agreement and amend the budget.
Good evening, Mayor Cool and council members. The item before you tonight is the consultant services agreement for preparation of the Town of Ross Master's Facility Plan and budget adjustment recommended as a result of this agreement. The Town of Ross desires to move forward with the preparation of a master plan for the town's municipal facilities and emergency services, not including fire, but including both police and paramedic services. These facilities presently include Ross Town Hall, a Ross Public Safety Building, a Public Works Building, and a portable building immediately adjacent to Town Hall. Given the breadth of tasks, skill sets required, and timeline for completion of the Master's Facilities Plan, town staff prepared, formally announced, and distributed a request for proposals to qualified consultants to prepare this Master's Facilities Plan and related tasks. Staff used a panel comprised of internal staff and a qualified outside representative to evaluate the proposals and interview the consultant teams. The panel used the following criteria to evaluate the proposals and teams. First, the firm's qualifications, the project team members' technical experiences, understanding of project issues and expected results, quality of proposed work plan, and quality of references. The proposal by the KPA group was ranked the highest. The panel was appreciative of the understanding that the KPA group conveyed of previous municipal facilities that they have worked on and acknowledging the special local character of the town of Ross. The reference checks for the KPA group were extremely positive. Entering into an agreement with the KPA group for the preparation of the Master's Facility Plan will cost $162,000 and $285,000. In addition, the budget for this project requires an additional $5,000 for miscellaneous expenses that may be incurred by the town, such as audiovisual services and refreshments for associated community meetings, enhanced noticing, and other services that may arise during the development of the plan. The current fiscal year 2022-23 budget includes $150,000 for preparation of the plan, and it's in the Facilities and Equipment Fund. The budget will be amended to $168,000 to cover the cost of the agreement with the KPA group and the $5,000 for anticipated miscellaneous expenses. Tonight, it is recommended that the Town Council authorize the Town Manager to execute an agreement with the KPA group in an amount not to exceed $162,285 for the preparation of the Facilities Master Plan, and to amend the current budget for this project in the Facilities and Equipment Fund from $150,000 to $168,000. Luckily, tonight, we do have the KPA group here. We have Matthew Evans, who's a project associate, and Lisa Lim, who's a senior project manager, and myself, as well as them, are available for questions, and they are actually right here in the back. That is Matthew and Lisa. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions for any of the three people mentioned?
Rebecca, you said on your list the Ross Town Hall is included, and I was always under the impression that this building was not going to be touched, and I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on what needs to happen to this building.
I think that it will be evaluated as part of this master facilities plan. Part of the RFP included 3 different options. And so I think if it's the council's will, that it would include 1 or 2 options with this remaining, the shell of remaining, and then 1 option without. But that's something that we can definitely explore through the needs assessment with the KPA group.
One more question with the whole housing element component. I'm just wondering how the master plan will evaluate potential housing on this site.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we, anticipate in our draft housing element sites inventory map that there'll be 5 units on this site. The KPA group has provided over 35 years of architectural and engineering services for public projects through Northern California. Their experience with California local codes as it applies to public housing. And should they not have the expertise in their firm, they would hire a subconsultant to evaluate how housing units are constructed.
Anyone else have any questions for the planner? Okay, we'll open it to the public. Is there any member of the public present here who wishes to address us on this item? Seeing none, are there any members of the public on Zoom who wish to address us?
There's no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, that being the case, I'll bring this back to the council for discussion and decision. Does anyone wish to make any further comments?
I think it's fine to proceed. Do we need a motion, or we're just instructing you to proceed?
You have a comment?
I have a comment, and I was looking through I'm sorry, I was looking through my emails because I can't ever remember the type of architecture that this building and the firehouse is called. It's like Spanish Revival or something like that. I think it's really important to try to preserve and or replicate the facades of these buildings. I think this is the identity of our town. I'm not sure this comment is relevant right now, but I think it's important for the consultant to understand that that's really critical. I know it's probably going to cost more money, but I think our community would be up in arms if we changed how it looks and feels.
Does any
I
member
agree.
of the, other member of the public have any comment? Not the public, the council.
I would concur with what Julie said on that point.
Yeah, so would I.
Looking for more of the same.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion?
It's called Spanish Colonial Revival, and the facilities were originally designed in 1927 by architect John White.
I'll move to approve the consultant services agreement.
Second.
Okay,
Let's take the vote. How do you vote? Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Kutcher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Mayor Cole?
aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that brings us to item 10, which is Town Council consideration of introduction of ordinance number 718, which adopts and amends Title 15 of the Ross Municipal Code to adopt the 2022 California Building Standards Code Title 24 of the 2022 California Code of Regulations. Rebecca?
Yes, thank you once again, Mayor Cool. Tonight, we are recommending that the town council introduce ordinance number 718, adopting certain parts of Title 24 Code of Regulations with local amendments. These are commonly referred to as the California Building Codes. The building codes are updated every 3 years and will become effective statewide January 1st, 2023. The proposed ordinance would adopt and amend the California Title 24 construction codes, as well as many sections of Chapter 15 in our Ross Municipal Code, buildings and construction of that code. All of the town's amendments are carried over from the previous 2019 update, and there are no new amendments with the 2022 California Building Codes. Tonight, staff would like to note that we will be deferring the REACH code discussion to the spring of 2023 to allow staff more time to understand the impacts of the REACH code on the community.
Julie?
Rebecca, can you just explain what is the REACH code?
I will do my best, yes. It is a local amendment, and Ben, maybe you can help me out here too, that sort of further amends our building code. And so right now, Marin County has come out with a REACH code that is asking for a slew of things, and sort of the one that most of the cities and towns are talking about are requiring all new construction to go all electric. And so that is the one that we will probably have the most discussions about and look into and research more before we bring it to you.
Anyone else have, Bill?
Just a question, is there anything in here that is controversial as opposed to simply incremental?
In the code that we're
revised
looking at?
code, yes, something that's generated some opposition
No,
or controversy?
no. No, I've looked at what was happened in 2019, and I have a little bullet point list if you would like some examples, but nothing controversial, nothing that's caused us to take pause over the past 3 years.
Except that that if we pass this, we are going along with the all-electric.
No, no.
No.
We're not talking about that till the spring.
Oh, okay,
This is required building codes in California.
okay.
Test that electric induction cooktops before we make that decision.
Does anyone else on the council have any further questions? Is there anyone in the public? I don't believe there is anyone here. Is there anyone on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, then we'll bring it back for decision. Does anyone have any further comments about this proposed amendment? Seeing none, does someone want to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, how do you vote, Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus? And Mayor Cole?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that brings us to item 11, which is Town Council consideration of introduction of ordinance number 719, which revises Chapter 1404 of the Ross Municipal Code, adopting the 2022 edition of the California Fire Code and 2021 International Fire Code with certain local amendments and additions, and Appendix A of the 2021 International Wildland Urban Interface Code. I'm sorry that you gentlemen had to wait so long for us to get to you, but I hope you found what you heard very entertaining.
We absolutely did.
And we're glad to have you here.
Alrighty, so little discussion items tonight. Of course, well, thank you, Mayor and council members, for hearing this ordinance proposal. In the consideration of the ordinance, which would amend the Town Ross Municipal Code to adopt the 2022 edition of the California Fire Code, 2021 International Fire Code with local amendments and additions, along with the Appendix A of the International Wildland Urban Interface Code. The adoption process is required by the Town Council to stay current with the minimum requirements of State of California building and fire standards as determined by the California Building Standards Commission. Every 3 years, the California Building Standards Commission publishes model codes such as the California Fire Code, Building Code, Mechanical Code, Plumbing Code, etc. Once published, local agencies have 180 days to make additions or amendments based on local conditions. If no changes are made during that 180-day window, the model codes become effective. Based on the 180-day cycle, the town has until January 1st, 2023 to make local changes. For the last 8 cycles, the Marin County Fire Prevention Officers have met and cooperatively reviewed the model code. This proposed ordinance represents a cooperative effort to develop standard ordinance language. While some minor changes occur between jurisdictions, the end result is a more consistent and cooperative approach to fire safety issues, making it easier for contractors and developers to work with each jurisdiction. The draft ordinance includes wording in red, which is what RFD has added to the cycle, and the wording in green is where modifications were made to the state codes. A couple of the amendments out there, there's no major changes. We added some definitions. We added some construction requirements for exterior wildfire protection systems and home backup generators. We added a section requiring target hazard buildings to have pre-plans. Added a section requiring fire access gate setbacks to reduce hazardous traffic conditions. Added a section pertaining to exterior wildfire protection systems again. Amend Chapter 12, which is the energy systems to provide clarity and additional equipment, which we're adding emergency shutoffs and signage for PV systems in those home generators. Make it easier for our crews on emergencies. We are adding home generators, and then we're amending Chapter 49, which is the Wildland Urban Interface section of the code to address fire hazards reduction and relocating language, addressing how to abate in the designated areas. And then that includes adding a couple sections to the fire protection plan as well to address our local concerns. Any questions?
So
Yes,
I had a question. The gate setback required, the gates are required to be set back 30 feet. So if a gate is not currently set back 30 feet, what's the status of that property?
That's not its property. It's approved at the time the code was, the time it was installed for the code that was adopted at the time. The 30-foot setback is only for fire roads or driveways that serve as a fire road.
Oh, I see. So it's not a private driveway that,
Some private driveways do serve as our fire lanes, yes. If they're deep offset lots or flag lots where they're greater than 150 feet off the main road.
I see, but the vast majority of gates wouldn't fall under this. Is that correct?
There's going to be very few changes.
Okay. And then I had a question about the generator. The generators that now require a construction permit, you're not talking about the type that people sort of pull out of their shed and hook up to a propane tank?
No, these are ones that are connected to the building's power supply.
Okay,
And
okay,
And really what that does is it takes us back to the language where the signage and shutoffs, so it's universal for our first responders when they show up on a scene at nighttime or
okay.
any event of emergency.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? I'm just curious what the green writing is.
So that was the resectioning, renumbering some of the model code language, and there was a couple little additions to that. But nothing that really was affected.
Okay.
There was a lot of rewording they did this year or this cycle.
Okay, Julie.
Thank you. So all the new information about fire hazard reduction, if people don't follow that, then you can use the nuisance abatement process to either force them to do it, or somebody else does it and asks them to pay for the work that was done.
Correct. The abatement process has been in place for multiple cycles, and it's a tool for us to use. Yes, correct.
Is that something you all use very often?
We use that. Usually it's most of any of the abatements are taken care of in the first step of sending a letter, a certified letter where they get it and open it up, and usually it's taken care of at that time.
Okay.
We have over the years had to take it through the abatement process, which is very time consuming as staff.
I think most jurisdictions don't have abatement processes. That's my understanding.
My understanding is everybody in Marin County has the same abatement process.
Ah,
It's the districts, like Kentfield did not have one until last cycle.
okay.
But most towns have an abatement, nuisance abatement that I've seen in all the codes, especially the 4 that we cover.
Interesting, because I was under the understanding that if the MWPA does a defensible space inspection and the homeowner doesn't do anything about it or does, not enough, we didn't really have any recourse. So I'm really comforted to see this language. It's wonderful.
So, yeah, MWPA is not an enforcing agency. They're just doing home evaluations and making recommendations. If there was something that was egregious, they would send it to us and we would follow up and take it through the abatement process.
Got it. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I do have one
Bill?
question. Sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
I was perusing the amendments, and Chapter 12, Energy Systems, talks about labeling power sources clearly identified and so forth. Is this something that would apply to existing systems or simply new installations?
Only new or modified systems. Anytime a new permit would be applied for.
I have a question, if I may. Our next item on the agenda, which I'm not asking you to stay for, has a proposal to, for ADUs to potentially put 2 trees if someone puts the ADU within 4 feet of the fence line of the neighbor. And I just wondered, from a fire perspective, would you, because it says if fire allows it, and my question is, do you allow a tree to be planted within 4 feet of a building and a property line? Is that a
So
realistic?
The way the code reads is no vegetation within that 5 feet can be planted. Or a tree has to be planted in such that when mature, that it will fall fall outside, the drip line will fall 5 feet outside of that zero zone is what they call it. So no, there would be no vegetation being able to be planted in that unless it was like an ivy or some type of ground cover.
And when you say no vegetation, like even, podocarpus or pittosporum or something non-tree-like, can that be done?
So the way it reads is non-combustible within that 0 to 5 foot zone.
And that would be combustible, so.
Anything that would burn, yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions?
I just have a comment, which is, we have a town generator policy. And it's my view that we should be encouraging people to install solar panels, and to the extent that they have an area that gets plenty of sun, and then they should install a backup battery rather than a noisy, polluting generator. And I'm wondering if these proposed regulations they're silent on the preference. And I guess it's not an opportunity to have any kind of a preference or an encouragement for backup batteries instead of a generator.
The fire code doesn't change the town's preferences. It only addresses when they are installed and what the requirements would be for that to be installed. And there is a couple cases where batteries just don't have enough power to operate some of these big, engine-driven and motor-driven fire pumps and other stuff out there that are required.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Did I ask for public comment?
I don't think so, Mayor.
Do we have a lot of public comment?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, we'll bring it back for a decision by the council. Does anyone have any further comments on this item? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 719.
Just to be clear, it's just to introduce the first reading.
Introduce the first reading, sorry.
Yeah, this item, we have to actually hold a public hearing later, but we are permitted to allow comment.
Correct. It's the reverse of most ordinances, but in this context, we have a first reading tonight, which we're allowed to have public comment, which we did. But on the second reading, when we adopt, usually put down the consent, but actually have to have another public hearing the next
Okay.
meeting.
All right.
Okay, let's take the vote. How do you vote? Councilmember McMillan? Aye. Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Mayor Cool?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Item penultimate.
Well, now Elizabeth is educating us. Good evening once again. The town council has requested that a review and discussion of the town's accessory dwelling units ordinance. And so to facilitate that discussion, I'll give a brief history of the ADU ordinance and describe how Ross's ADU ordinance compares to other cities using Belvedere, Tiburon, San Anselmo, and Larkspur as examples. And finally, I will provide topical suggestions for possible amendments to the code based on prior discussions with town council and staff's own experience using the ADU ordinance. So as you know, over the past 3 years, the state of California has implemented legislation restricting local control to remove barriers from building ADUs and to preempt local regulation and land use control for certain types of ADU applications. The town responded with amendments and ordinances in 2016 and 2020. ADU construction is regulated through planning approval and through the building permit process. The town has incorporated into the ADU ordinance objective standards that meet some of the town of Ross's needs, similar to neighboring Marin towns. And because the state has such specific requirements that limit local control, many of these jurisdictions' development standards are similar to the town of Ross's. Those include location, access, kitchen facilities and bathrooms, setbacks, floor area, and parking requirements. The town has incorporated more specific standards, for example, for lighting, windows, and landscaping, and those are up on this slide right here. In other jurisdictions, Tiburon, Belvedere, and San Anselmo have more specific requirements for architectural than Ross does. For example, Tiburon and Belvedere require that the colors and materials of an ADU match that of the existing home. Tiburon and San Anselmo have requirements for entryway locations in relation to property lines. And Larkspur has restricted areas which prohibit ADUs in very high fire zones. Staff finds that working with the ADU ordinance is relatively straightforward and clear to apply. And previous to our last presentation from Rob, I was going to suggest that we incorporate some type of landscaping in between ADUs and a property line fence, should they be approved ministerially with that 4-foot side and rear yard setback. But it sounds like maybe that's not going to be allowed with the fire code. Our next steps is, as we're all aware, the housing element is currently being updated. ADU production is a significant component of our housing element update. So any amendment to the ADU ordinance should consider the fact that ADU production will increase and should increase over the next 8 years. Yesterday, staff received information on 2 new bills that have recently been passed that make revisions to the existing state law, which go into effect January 1st, 2023. 2 of these are up here. Town staff is analyzing them and at a minimum will likely require further revisions to the ordinance. These 2 examples are here. One is that the height of an ADU can go up to 18 feet, as well as there's conversations about front yard setbacks and perhaps that ADUs can encroach into the front yard setback. Again, there's further evaluation that will need to happen between myself and Ben and all the other jurisdictions that are just realizing that these new standards are out there. And so tonight, I'm here for questions, should you have any, or to sort of open up the conversation and
I'm sorry, I just don't remember off the top of my head. It did say that you can go up to 8, by right, you have to be allowed to go up to 18 feet. And is that for a 2nd-story ADU or a single story? That's a 2nd story, right? Or over the garage or something?
Yeah, it's 18 feet for detached ADU on a lot. Detached on a lot within 1/2 mile of a walking distance of a major transit stop or high-quality transit corridor, which is the same definition that we just went over in the SB 9 ordinance you adopted. And then 18 feet for a detached ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed multifamily house.
So
and
the
then,
18 feet is for a 2-story, right?
No, that's 18 feet for a detached, and then it can be up to 25 feet height limit under the local zoning ordinance for an ADU attached to a primary dwelling, although we can make sure it doesn't go up past 2 stories. So it's higher for attached ADU.
Okay, so, because 18 is pretty high. I thought that in a lot of cities were limiting them to like 6 feet.
Yeah. The new legislation that just was signed last week, yeah.
So even if we pass this, we're going to be bringing it back to modify for, do these provisions come into?
In January, and nothing tonight is before you to pass. I think what we're looking for is direction on things that you might want to see in a revised ordinance, because we're going to have to revise it regardless under the new legislation. And as Rebecca and I were talking, we're going to have to revise it likely in addition because of the housing element programs that we're trying to encourage ADU production in order to satisfy our housing element.
Just expect ADUs to be on every agenda going forward.
Well, we're hoping we can consolidate it into 1 or 2 meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Julie?
Yeah, that's, what are you doing up there?
Yeah, so I have it here too, yeah. Local agencies are prohibited from imposing any parking standards on an accessory dwelling unit that is included in an application to create a new single-family dwelling unit or a new multifamily dwelling unit on the same lot, provided the ADU meets other specified requirements. So yes, it's prohibiting us from requiring parking. It's difficult right now to require parking, just given the half-mile distance to a transit or high, I haven't seen many ADUs in the past year having parking being required. Not a very big one, yeah.
Is the, oh, yes, speak. I think that was an interesting guideline in some of the other towns that the materials should match the primary house. I think that sounds nice. I mean, I wouldn't mind adopting that, but I mean, I don't want it to, slow down the ADU building, but that might be a nice way of keeping ADUs aesthetically pleasing.
Yes.
When ADUs are proposed, do they go through ADR in terms of their design?
They do. My understanding is it has been the town's past practice for ADUs that aren't able to be approved ministerially, meaning they're 800 square feet, 4 feet from the side and rear yard setbacks, meet the front yard setback, and are 800 square feet or less. If they don't meet those requirements, then they go through design review and they go to ADR as well as town council. And I think that's something that perhaps the council should discuss. If we are trying to encourage them, do we need 2 public hearings? Could they come straight to town council instead of going to ADR as well as town council?
But they still would come to town council.
If they don't meet the ministerial requirements, yes.
It turns us, go ahead.
I was just thinking of, imposing some kind of similar design as the existing structure on new ADUs. I think it's kind of cool if you have a house in one design and then the ADU is completely different and you're having a completely different statement. And then I thought, well, maybe the ADR can figure that out and we won't have to. But I guess I would be reluctant to have it be codified that it needs to match the existing. So I think it's good to allow some flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that I understand in line with this issue of color being the same as the primary unit. I also saw a provision, and I'm not sure I understood it, about you can't make any requirements that provide for discretion in making decisions.
Correct. You have to have objective standards. So if you wanted the colors, if you wanted something architecturally, it would sound something like the colors and materials of the ADU shall match the primary residence.
I mean, I'm not sure we want to do that, but okay. Do you think we should do that?
You don't have it now. I think Julie brings up a good point that, do you want everything to look the same?
Well, I don't want to do anything that the state tells us to do. On general principles.
We missed that vote.
I mean, it sounds like if they're ministerially approved, we can't, if there are no design standards, we can
If they
offer
don't
anyway.
meet those ministerial requirements, then they are subject to design review.
What-
Say
what-
you wanted to build an ADU that's 1,200 square feet, then it would be, it's open up to design review.
Are there very many ADUs in Ross that aren't ministerially approved?
Yeah,
Yeah, we've definitely approved some.
yeah.
I guess like the second story one not too long ago.
There's one will be coming, that's 535 square feet, but it's encroaching into the front yard setback because it's proposed on top of an existing garage and carport. So that requires discretionary review, even though it's relatively small in size.
You know, maybe for the,
Yeah.
maybe for the design part of it, I mean, I don't think we want to add fees to people who are building ADUs. We want to encourage that. But I'm not sure that we want to be the planning commission for the ADUs. So maybe we still have them go through, the ones that aren't ministerially approved, they go through ADR, and they can decide if the colors or whatever are good, but we don't charge them a fee for that. And that way we get the benefit of ADR. They don't have to pay, and we don't have to be a planning commission.
If we did that, how much revenue would we be leaving on the table?
A ministerially approved ADU, I think, is around $1,200. I think for discretionary review, I don't have the fee schedule in front of me, but I think it's around $4,000 or $5,000 deposit that we take in and we build towards that deposit. It becomes a deposit-based project if it requires discretionary review.
So we have talked about that as a possible priority of ours to make it easier to build ADUs. So that might be a way to do it.
Yeah, I guess I would want more thorough analysis about, what's the give and take and what's the overall impact and what's the projection over time, what's the history.
But can we, I mean, this is kind of different than what you're talking about. It sounds like when we have housing element and we go forth, we might want to streamline some things to incentivize it. But what we're talking about today, as I understand it, is just, hey, here's some additional regulations. Do you want to adopt these additional regulations? We could probably tinker with them if we thought they were problematic with the housing element, but, right? I mean, going through ADR or not is not really within the scope of what we're talking about for this particular item, if I'm understanding that.
Yeah, I think it's a discussion on our ADU ordinance and, are there things that we're seeing in other jurisdictions or things that you've heard about that might make our ordinance better, for lack of a better word.
Well, do you have recommendations along those?
Well, I had one, but it just got shot down by fire because what I'm seeing where there are problems is, you can have a ministerially approved ADU. I mean, it just comes through town staff. That is 4 feet from your side and rear property line. And the neighbors can't say anything about it. And on some of the lots, it's okay, right? We have some very large lots here in Ross. On some of them, for example, on Allen, there are a lot of ADUs popping up and they're very close to the neighbors. There's one at 78 Shady right now that the neighbor is not happy with, but there's nothing she can do about it because it meets those specific standards. So I thought requiring landscaping, it would have to be very specific, would be a good idea, but it's not a good idea.
Well, I'm curious about that. The way that it's worded in Tiburon's ordinance is kind of good. It says, 2 trees shall be planted each proposed window of the ADU facing a neighbor property where such trees are consistent with the fire code. Because I think sometimes what happens is, first up, we heard from Rob, but sometimes there have been times where we'll have, reached out to the fire department and there's been some modifications of that. So I think we shouldn't just completely say, that can't happen. But I also really like the clear story windows for that reason. Like, I don't like our ordinance and the way it talks about the windows, because I don't care if I didn't have clear story windows facing the neighbor. If I'm going to, you know, it's like kind of unfairly developing one lot at the expense of another, you know? And for the purpose of an ADU, which more than half, I would guess, in town are not actually used for additional housing. So it seems unfair to, you know, benefit someone's office. I mean, they can have windows, just not facing the neighboring property. And I think that we should make that clear story so that we don't, just because I'm not using my rear yard as close, doesn't mean I should have full-size windows facing a neighbor. I guess that's leading into one. Maybe you want to give it to the public, because I'm.
Okay, anybody else have questions? Yes.
A question for Rebecca, in terms of what we've seen so far with regard to ADU applications, is there an issue where, or have you encountered issues where someone has constructed or is intending to construct an ADU that is not consistent color-wise or in terms of the architectural style, or are owners, in your opinion, sort of taking care of that because then their house wouldn't look good?
I think, yeah, given the sort of the level of caring of development in this town, I haven't seen, you know, just a sort of box placed on a lot. It seems like people actually really do care about the integrity of their property and the development, and they have been consistent.
Anyone have any further questions? Any public discussion?
There's no raised hands.
Okay, we'll bring it back for action. Well, I guess this is not an action item. So unless anybody has any further comments, we will.
I have
Yes.
some comments. So,
I have one too.
you know, the items that I think that we should consider would be, I agree with Julie's comment about colored materials. Maybe we leave that, because I agree, a modern next to a older home is kind of a cool idea. But I do like the Tiburon one where no windows facing the rear and side property lines are allowed when located less than 6 feet from the rear or side property line, or making it a clear story. I just think that, so what Tiburon does is says, if you're not gonna put it 4 feet, no windows on that side facing the neighbor. You put it 6 feet, you can have windows. And at that point, then they have provision about the trees. Which they might have to change, other their fire department may just be a little more, you know, but we could consider, you know, some kind of, you know, we could consider, okay, 8 feet, you can have windows, but then you have to have trees. Or if you're not going to be that far, then it's clear story windows or something along those lines. And I think that would be pretty good. The other one I like is no entryways are allowed within 10 feet of a side or rear property line. So let's assume you got your ADU right here. You're on 4 feet here, 4 feet here. Well, then that means that your entryway has to be within 10 feet of the property line or over on this side. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's a good.
What's the purpose of that? I don't think I understand.
I don't have people coming and going right next to within 4 feet. I mean,
I mean, right next to the
imagine-
neighbor, so the people aren't coming and going right next to a neighbor. So that makes sense. And I think your idea of no windows makes sense. I mean, it's true, if you're putting something right at the property line, I mean, you wouldn't normally want a window there. Right. That's true. I mean, it does, yeah, but you can't, but this can't be discretionary. But I agree.
Well,
I
you
mean,
could-
what if it's,
Create problems though with design. Let somebody have an entry within some short distance of the back property line.
I think it's difficult to get an entry 4 feet from a fence essentially. And that was one of the suggestions that I was going to make. I have had, I think it's helpful if you are in a denser area to have that entryway not at the side or rear of the structure. I think it helps just pull sort of the development away from that corner of the lot.
I think that makes sense. I mean, the windows, I mean, I totally agree, there should be windows, but then what if it's 4 feet from the road and then it doesn't really matter? So how do we keep ADUs from not having windows right next to a neighbor's property without it being discretionary?
Well, I can answer that. I think, first of all, we're talking the side and rear setback for the windows issue, not the front yard front setback. These standards we're talking about are non-discretionary permits, ministerial permits for ADUs. So if someone comes in, we have to have our list of objective standards, and they get applied if they don't want to go through any of our discretionary processes. So if someone is really, makes it the case that there's someone, that their boundary line is so far from a neighboring house, you can still have an ADU with windows. They just have to go through our discretionary process at that point.
Perfect. Okay, so that's
So I
good.
think that's why some jurisdictions like Tiburon have it as the standard for someone who doesn't want to go through a discretionary process, but there's still always the option of going through the exception process.
So I think that's a good standard to not have windows at the back or side if it's close, and then we can,
If that's what the applicant wants and they don't want to go,
right.
they want to off-the-shelf product.
You could also think about clear story windows and require them to be 6.5 feet above.
What's the
the floor.
benefit of clear
Still
story
a big,
window?
To add light. You can't see out of them, but you can get light in.
So it preserves the privacy of the neighbor, but you still get some light. I mean, one in-between option is we say you can have, clear story windows if you plant it 6 feet away, because 6 feet is actually, that's like a Sausalito's property line, but 6 feet away from the property line, or, but if you're going to put it within 4 feet or 6 or less, then there's no windows,
do clear story windows open? Can they? No?
No, they don't typically open. And I mean, it's not great to look at a blank wall. It feels like you're looking at a Amazon warehouse, when you're looking at a blank wall. So having some architectural interest isn't bad. But if you can't put any landscaping between it, and the person, I mean, the problem is sometimes people are not incentivized to landscape an area that they can barely see or they're not even using or something. That's kind of the shame of these ADUs.
The landscaping is going to fall to the neighbor on the other side of the fence. There's no way getting around that, because they're not constrained by the fire requirements, and they're going to want it.
I'm curious about the Tiburon one that says no portico, trellis, or other roof is allowed as part of the accessory dwelling unit. A 5 by 5 foot roof, entryway roof is allowed, must be at least 10 feet from any property line. I can kind of envision like a little situation like that, but right now, someone could do that. They could bump up and do a portico or trellis.
I have an application right now for an ADU that has a large trellis off of it and a deck underneath it. And I looked into the code, and there's nothing that necessarily prohibits it, but it didn't feel right for me. So I still don't know. Our standards are specific to the structure, and we don't have anything that sort of goes into whether you can have a structure coming off of the structure.
Well, I
So
sort of like
I
that
think this
provision
is
too,
good. We allow entryways. I think the code requires 100, you can have 150 square feet for an entryway. I think this is good. It kind of it's clear.
It defines what you
Yeah.
can and can't.
Yeah.
And what about a deck? What about decking around ADU? What is the rule around
Well, you
that?
can't have a deck in a setback, right? So if you're proposing one of these ministerial ADUs, then you can't have anything if you're in that setback. You just get the ADU and the entryway.
And do we start looking at lot coverage then? When you're looking at the ADU and someone brings you an ADU, that's out of the setback, then do you say, okay, let me do a lot coverage analysis of this property?
If it's greater,
Deck.
if it's taller than 18 inches off the grade, I think, but I have to look at our definition. I mean, I look at it, yes.
Well, I think it'd just be helpful. I mean,
I can bring more information on it.
yeah, I mean, obviously, we're gonna be revisiting this thing a couple more times again. But I think that we should at least, I mean, I like that no portico trellis, because it's making the accessory dwelling unit kind of a big presence, you know, which I think is a little not necessary. And I do like the entryways. And then I think we could do, you know, my thought would be allow clear story windows. I mean, maybe we just allow clear story windows, even if it's 4 feet. What do you think about that?
I guess, I mean, my first thought was no windows, but when you say that it looks awful to look at a wall, maybe that's better, though that wall's gonna be lit up at night. You know, you might not be that happy about it. I could go either way, no windows or clear story.
Plus, if they can be 18 feet high, that's, you know, that's, imagine your fence is 6 feet and you're looking at a huge wall with no architectural interest on the, on
So
that.
we actually sort of have that because there's a barn that's right behind. Oh, you know that barn. We don't mind a bit that there are no windows. I mean, we're sort of delighted that there are no windows. So I don't know. I whatever the group thinks. I think I might be in favor of no windows if it's right at the edge, because I think that sort of intrudes on the neighbor. And if they wanted windows, then they could go through the council. And if it seemed like the neighbors didn't mind and it was reasonable, then maybe we do it. That might be how I would see it.
I know it's so hard because we do want there to be ADUs because we need to get them for our housing element. So it's like, I don't want to propose something that, on the other hand, I have a whole side of my house that has almost no windows in my second story. It's fine. The windows are elsewhere, you know?
Have you heard enough?
No, never.
Is it clear? Beach is done with this conversation.
I have heard enough, and I was just going to say that I can come back with maybe some illustrations of ADUs with clear story windows, without clear story, some just sort of different scenarios, so we can, you know, because it's not an action item tonight, we can discuss it further and with some illustrations that might help.
Thanks.
I agree with Elizabeth's suggestions. I think they're very good suggestions. We could incorporate something along the lines of what she's saying and then leave for a later decision about the clear windows and whatnot. Or
Yes.
perhaps you could give us some alternatives.
Yes.
What do you think about the skylights? I kind of like the skylight provision in Belvedere.
That is, you can have them.
Where visible from off-site locations, skylights shall not have white or light opaque colored exterior lenses. I mean, look, there's nothing that's going to change this town more than the ADUs we're about to plan for. So I think we should be a little picky about how we do this. And if, as you go along and see these, Rebecca, and you think, okay, we could fine tune this, or this could be more clear, you know, I think we should just keep tinkering with this thing, because it's just like we're building a lot of them under our
Right.
plan.
I mean, I think people are going to build them because you get them. And if they don't have quite as many windows or skylights, which I find to be intrusive on the neighbors, they're still going to build them. So we'll still have it for housing. That's our whole town.
Yeah. I just, with our housing element update, I don't think that's a good direction to go. I agree. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? You want to solicit comments from us on particular issues?
No, as you mentioned, I think I've heard enough. And I can come back. You know, there's obviously some work that needs to be done on the ADU ordinance, given this conversation, the new laws, and our housing element. So this won't be the last time you hear from me about this topic.
Okay, then unless somebody has something further on this one, we'll move on to the end of public hearings on planning projects, since there were none. And does anybody have any council correspondence they wish to bring to our attention? Yes.
I have two. One is oversight of PG&E, tree trimming, as well as work that's been going on, and I've already talked to Krista about it. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening with PG&E, and they don't, with trees as well as with power pole replacements, and I've received a lot of comments from neighbors.
Didn't you set up some meeting with Mark Van Gorder?
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, we had Rich Simonich and I and another staff member had a Zoom meeting earlier this week with Mark Van Gorder, who's the government affairs representative for PG&E, and also their staff person whose first name is Tony, who focuses on their tree maintenance program. And we learned a lot, and I was planning on sending a little information to the council tomorrow about what we learned. However, Mr. Van Gorder did offer to come and speak to the council, and I think it would be very informative to hear from him directly about their programs. And if the council would like me to work on scheduling that with him, I think it would be helpful for him to hear from the whole council.
It's appropriate, but I'm not entirely sure it is. Can I ask what PG&E's policy is with respect to felled trees on people's property?
I'm going to ask Rich to help me a little bit, just to make sure that I don't misspeak. And I'm very happy that Rich is still here. Thank you for staying through the whole meeting, Rich. But they do have, they gave us a whole bunch of information about the trees. But the good news, what we learned on Tuesday, is if the trees that they take down if that debris is in the public right of way, so for example, on your neighbor across the street, a big tree was cut down and they left the debris in the public right of way, even though it was not a nice flat place, it's a ditch, they are required to remove it. And they said they're, what requires that, Rich?
That's the CP. The law that requires it is the CPUC order. I forget the number. It's Order 95, Rule 35, or something like that. And they differentiate between trees that have been felled in the right of way with trees that have been felled on private property. So in the right of way, they will come and they'll clear off those pieces of the tree that are greater than 6 inches. They will remove that. On private property is a little bit different. They say that that felled trees do have a value. But if the tree debris is creating an adverse situation where it could, if they left it there and it could roll down the hill and cause damage or cause injury, they will come and remove it if it is accessible for them to come and get it. So, and this is set up by the CPUC, so they hang their hat on those California regulations.
I also believe that, I recall that, they have their regular maintenance that they do. And then they also have a enhanced program that they are required by the state of California or the CPUC to go in to communities once, not once every 10 years, but just once. It's a 10-year program. And during that 10-year period of time, PG&E is going to come in to every city and do a very, very robust, enhanced tree trimming, tree removal, tree evaluation. And they have not come to Ross yet. Right now they are doing this work in Fairfax and Mill Valley. I know those are two examples of cities. They haven't come to Ross yet. And I believe they said that we're 4 years into the 10-year process, and they weren't able to say when they will be coming to Ross to do this enhanced work. When they do start scheduling it for Ross, they will be doing an extensive outreach program. But I believe what I got out of that conversation is that when they are in Ross doing this enhanced program, that they will be required to pick up more of the debris. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's maybe one positive thing about that, besides, of course, the fact that it should be increasing our wildfire prevention. But there's a lot of different categories. Is it maintenance? Is it enhanced? There's a lot of different things that go on. We also, one of my, am I talking too much?
Yes.
Oh,
It's not on the agenda, so I
Yeah.
have to kind of cut off this conversation. It was brief response to the community concern, but if we want to talk about it, we could agendize it.
So Mark Van Goder welcomes the opportunity to come speak with you, and so if you'd like me to schedule that, I'd be happy to do so.
I don't really want to hear from him, but.
You don't, did you say?
Yeah,
I kind of agree. He's a PR guy.
but we could express ourselves to him, so that might be an opportunity, right? So I would like to hear from him, so I can express myself. The other correspondence that I received was from a neighbor who lives on Ivy Drive, which is a private road. And there was a large construction project that went on up there. And as part of the conditions of the permit, the town was going to do a video to assess the condition of the road and then compare that video pre-construction to post-construction. That for whatever reason, it didn't happen. I'm not sure that's the best system for us to assess damage to private roads because it's very, very subjective. And the homeowner who's doing the construction will point to lots of other things that could have happened along the way. So I personally think that maybe we need to come up with a different way to help homeowners on private roads when there's a big construction project protect their private road investment.
Well, I guess, obviously the second person wants it on the agenda.
Yeah.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering if there's anything specific enough to deal. Can I talk? Maybe I shouldn't say that even.
Yeah, I think, was that an agenda request? I think it was. Right. So I think it's an agenda request. I think that we shouldn't be discussing about correspondences we receive. Just announcing them on the record, and then we move on to next item on the agenda.
You've been heard. Does anyone else have any further correspondence to report? If not, does anyone have any future council items to request?
Well, I have one, but I already asked Julie about it, and she agreed that, to put it on, and that is that with the Bald Hill acquisition, there've been, people donating money, and the item would be to see if the town of Ross wants to consider making a donation to the acquisition of Bald Hill. In November, San Anselmo is expected to have on their agenda a contribution to Bald Hill. And Julie agreed with that. And the other part of that is to discuss putting a plaque to recognize donors at a certain level. We had very generous donors. The level's 25,000 and up. Donors at that level at the foot of Bald Hill in Frederick Allen Park. So that's Natalie Coffin Green Park. Yes. Anyway, the park at the base, which we own. So those are that's kind of the same, 1.5 agenda items.
We have a request for an agenda item. Anyone else have a request for any future agenda items? All right, then we're adjourned.